Okay, this is a voice check. Can you hear me? How do I come in? Do I come in clear? Any choppiness? Is this wonderful mountain internet actually working fairly well today? That's good. Okay, let's see. Let me look at the names here. I think there are some people that I've never met before. So I'll give an introduction. My name is Bhante Jayasara, or you can just call me Bhante J for short. Makes things nice and easy. I'm a Theravadan Buddhist monk who resides at Bhavana Society in West Virginia. Bhavana Society is a monastery and retreat center, and I reside with the abbot who is my preceptor, Bhante G, Bhante Gunaratana. And I have been on staff here at the Buddha Center for somewhere around 5 years, maybe 6 years at this point, well before I was a monastic. And when I was a regular lay person, I was the only Buddhist I knew in my daily life, and the Buddha Center was my Sangha. So I started out, actually the first time I ever listened to a monk speak live was right here, in this very virtual virtual deer park. So what we do here every Thursday is we alternate between two modes. 1 week, which we did last week, we have more of a open, casual Q&A. Basically, we let the discussion flow in terms of what topics to talk about, and anybody has questions and etc. And then we go to a sutta discussion. So what we are going to be doing today is going over this important sutta, which is discussing a very important topic and Buddhist understanding, which is the 5 aggregates. And this is the MahaPunnama Sutta, the great discourse on the full moon night. And so if you like, you can use the link to follow along, or you can just listen. If you have any questions at any time, feel free to type them out. You don't have to wait till the end or anything like that. We can, I'll be commenting and adding what understanding I can to this as we go along. And if you have any questions or anything you'd like to discuss, we can do that as well as we go along. So feel free to type, even when I'm talking. Don't feel like you're interrupting me if you're typing while I'm talking. If you start talking while I'm talking, that's when Second Life gets all funky, and that doesn't work. But definitely feel free to type while I'm talking. It's okay. Okay, so let's begin. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi, in the eastern park, in the palace of Migara's mother. Is there anybody here who has never read a sutta before, or heard somebody read one? Because that could also depend on how much I talk about. We are reading from the Majjhima Nikaya, which is the middle-length discourses of the Buddha. I'm reading off of my digital copy, and the link I provided is the same. Okay. So these are all teachings that have come down from the earliest strata of written suttas. Suttas are, you can call them discourses, which is, I think, is probably the best way. It's a teaching usually by the Buddha, almost always by the Buddha, and it's usually set up where somebody does something or comes to the Buddha and asks a question, and the Buddha answers. Because the Buddha, after he became enlightened for some 40 years, he basically wandered around India, sharing the Dhamma, and people would come up to him and ask questions and this kind of thing. So here we are at Savatthi, which is a very, very, I would say, a good portion, if not most of the suttas actually take place at Savatthi. So on that occasion, on the Apposita day of the 15th, Apposita days are full moon and new moon days. These are special days that date back to ancient cultures that have moon-based calendars, moon cycle-based. And so the way it's come down into modern times is that anytime there's an Apposita, this is a time for monastic and lay people to do a stronger or deeper practice, for this day. Lay people usually take on more precepts and do more meditation. And monastics, this is the time where monastics will do their confessions and come together to chant the monastic rules, which they do every 2 weeks. Because there's a cycle of new moon and full moon every 2 weeks. So, and these are usually special, auspicious days. It's come down in Buddhist culture that pretty much every full moon day has some kind of special event attached to it. So, on the Apposita day of the 15th, on the full moon night, the Blessed One was seated in the open, surrounded by a sangha of bhikkhus. Then a certain bhikkhu rose from his seat, arranged his upper robe on one shoulder. This is just a sign of paying respect. Even today, like if we wear a robe in a certain way, that we cover both shoulders when we're traveling. But if I were to not change my robe when I got to a monastery to, pay respects, bow to a senior monastic, that would be considered insulting. So this is why they arrange the robe on one shoulder. And extending his hands in reverential salutation, it's usually anjali, like palms together, towards the Blessed One, said to him, "Venerable Sir, I would ask the Blessed One about a certain point. If the Blessed One would grant me an answer to my question." "Sit on your own seat, bhikkhu, and ask what you like." So the bhikkhu sat on his own seat and said to the Blessed One, "Are these not, Venerable Sir, the 5 aggregates affected by clinging? That is, the material form aggregate affected by clinging, the feeling aggregate affected by clinging, the perception aggregate affected by clinging, the formations aggregate affected by clinging, and the consciousness aggregate affected by clinging." And so, just as an aside, has anybody never heard of the 5 aggregates at all before? Okay, well, you're going to have a pretty good familiarity by the end of this sutta. So, basically, what we understand as experience, what we understand to be us through our experience, as taught by the Buddha, is really only these 5 aggregates. These aggregates, the Pali word is khandas, which means like clumping together. An aggregate is a coming together of things, clumping together. So these 5 things clump together to create this being. And so when we have these 5 aggregates affected by clinging, that is when we attach to these 5 aggregates as me, mine, myself. We'll see this later in this sutta. And so when the Buddha, the Buddha's first noble truth is the noble truth of dukkha, often translated as suffering. And the Buddha's definition of dukkha is old age, sickness, death, pain, lamentation, sorrow, suffering, despair, but also union with what is not pleasing, so people, places, and experiences we don't like and we have to deal with. Separation from what is pleasing, people, places, and experiences we like, but we are separated from them. Not getting what one wants. And finally, in brief, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging are suffering. So the 5 aggregates that we cling to are dukkha. They are unsatisfactory, they are our suffering. And part of this practice is understanding this. And so we'll come to a greater understanding as we go along in this sutta. So the Buddha replies, these bhikkhus are the 5 aggregates affected by clinging. That is, material form aggregate affected by clinging. ... They've ellipsed this. There's a lot of repetition in the suttas. Everything is pretty much repeated verbatim, but in the translation they don't repeat what has been repeated a lot, and they will just put the word that is new. So when you hear me say ... it's basically the same as before. So it's just going through the 5 aggregates subject to clinging. Actually, since I started explaining the 5 aggregates, I'll quickly just go through. So form is any kind of form, internal, external, our body, and form that any kind of form that we have contact with, in the world, other people, places, experiences, things. That is form. Things that are made up of the elements. Feeling is what they call the hedonic tone of experience. It's not like I feel sad or I feel depressed. It's pleasant feeling, like you rub your head. Is that a pleasant feeling, an unpleasant feeling, or a neutral feeling? That's what it's meant by feeling. So the ability to have an understanding and experience of a certain, or actually an understanding of an experience. So what does it feel like? Is it pleasant? Is it painful? Is it neutral? Perception is identifying something, trying to understand what it is. You see the form, but what is it? So you see form. Perception is, oh, that's a cup, that's a printer, whatever. That's perception. Next is often translated as volitional formations. These are acts of intention, mental acts of intention. Some people just translate it as intention. And then the last is consciousness, the quality that's needed to experience all of these other things. So that's the 5 aggregates. And you'll understand more of them as we go along here. Okay. Saying, "Good, Venerable Sir," the bhikkhu delighted and rejoiced in the Blessed One's word. Then he asked him a further question. "But, Venerable Sir, in what are these 5 aggregates affected by clinging rooted? What are they rooted in? Where do they come from, or how do they come to be? That you become attached to them." And the Buddha's answer is, these 5 aggregates affected by clinging are rooted in desire, craving. Venerable Sir, is that clinging the same as these 5 aggregates affected by clinging? Or is the clinging something apart from the 5 aggregates affected by clinging? Bhikkhu, that clinging is neither the same, nor is it something apart from the 5 aggregates affected by clinging. It is the desire and lust in regard to the 5 aggregates affected by clinging. That is the clinging here. So it's the desire, attachment, and lust to the 5 aggregates that create the 5 aggregates of clinging. Even an awakened being has these 5 aggregates, but they're just called the 5 aggregates at that point. They're not the 5 aggregates of clinging, because the awakened being has let go of that craving, of that desire. But, Venerable Sir, can there be a diversity in the desire and lust regarding these 5 aggregates affected by clinging? Anytime you hear can there be a diversity, meaning can you see it in different ways, or is it explained or understood in different ways? There can be, Bhikkhu, the Blessed One said. Here, Bhikkhu, somebody thinks thus: may my material form, i.e. like the body, be thus in the future. May my feeling be thus in the future. May my perception be thus in the future. May my formations be thus in the future. May my consciousness be thus in the future. Thus there is diversity in the desire and lust regarding these 5 aggregates affected by clinging. An example of that, you could say, may my body not be sick in the future. May my body not grow old in the future. May I not lose hair in the future. That's just setting yourself up for all kinds of suffering, because your body does not listen to you. Okay. But, Venerable Sir, in what way does the term aggregates apply to the aggregates? And again, just as to go to the dictionary, aggregate is a whole formed by combining several parts. Bhikkhu, any kind of material form whatsoever, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near. This is the material form aggregate. Any kind of feeling whatsoever. And again, it goes, it's ... it's ellipse, but we're talking about past, future, present, internal, external, gross, subtle, etc. This is the feeling aggregate. Any kind of perception whatsoever. any kind of formations whatsoever are the formation aggregate. Any kind of consciousness whatsoever is the consciousness aggregate. It is in this way, Bhikkhu, that the term aggregate applies to the aggregates. What is the cause and condition, Venerable Sir, for the manifestation of the material form aggregate? What is the cause and condition for the manifestation of feeling, perception, mental formations, or intention formations, and consciousness? The four great elements, Bhikkhu, are the cause for the condition for the manifestation of material form aggregate. And so the four great elements are earth, water, wind, and fire. In Buddhism, these elements are not meant to be like scientific elements. They're more an understanding of your experience. So earth is solidity, like form, solid form. Water is liquidity, or movement, flux. Wind is wind, air, gaseousness. It's wind. And fire is temperature. So when they're talking about the elements, this is what they're talking about. Okay. Contact is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the feeling aggregate. So I need to explain a little bit of what contact is. It's a bit more complicated. So independent origination. Contact is the link in the chain that comes after having a body that has senses. So you have eyes, ears, nose, tongue. You have, the ability to touch with your body, and you have your mind. And so the I and the consciousness of the I experiences or has contact with, sees a form. That's contact. So the coming together of a form, the I, and consciousness at the I is contact. So basically, the ability, the using the senses to have experience with the outside world, or in the mind's case, the inner world. Right? And so when you have a body, you have the senses, you have an experience of contact. Somebody hugs you, that's contact. You feel pleasant or unpleasant. Somebody punches you in the face, that's contact. You feel pleasant or unpleasant. So your feeling comes after the contact. So that's why feeling is conditioned by contact. And if you're confused or not understanding this at this point, it's okay, you're not alone. This is not easy stuff. It gets harder than this, but not all that much harder. So we're dealing with some deep understandings here when we're talking about the aggregates. Okay, so contact is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the feeling aggregate. Contact is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the perception aggregate. Obviously, you cannot perceive something unless you've had contact with it. And usually, your perception comes after contact. Sometimes it might come before feeling, sometimes it might come after feeling. or at least consciously understanding, feeling. But in terms of dependent origination, this is how it works. So, contact is the causal condition for the manifestation of the formations aggregate. And then, Namarupa, or mentality and materiality, is the causal condition for the manifestation of the consciousness aggregate. So you need both the mentality and materiality to have this consciousness aggregate. And Bhikkhu Bodhi has a little note here, so I'll read through this. In the material form aggregate, each of the four great elements is a condition for the other three and for derived material form. Contact is a condition for each of the three middle aggregates. As it is said, contacted one feels, contacted one perceives, contacted one wills or intends. Okay, where was I here? Were you saying, were you going to type something, Dar? I saw the little chat box come up. Sure. You're asking if the mental intention comes before everything else? That's an interesting and complicated question, because in Paticca Samuppada, obviously it does. It's there, right? It's the second one, Sankhara. But here, it's not the first one. Although you don't necessarily have to take the five aggregates in some kind of a linear form. I don't know if I can answer that question any more deeply than that. It's an interesting question. Yeah, sure. Okay, where was I? Sure. Ask your question. Definition of Are you asking if there's a different definition of desire? I'm not quite sure if that's the question. Not necessarily, although yeah, I mean, there is a connotation. Like, for instance, the word sensual, right? in our society today, when we think of sensual, we usually think of sexual, but it just really means of the senses. So you'll see sensual in the suttas as a translation all the time, because that's really like, that's the legitimate, that's the legitimate translation. Although it might have different connotations in modern times. So I don't know the Pali word there, but what was actually in the word, but usually what's translated as desire is chanda. It's like your wish, your intention. And most often used in your intention to engage in sensual desire, your intention to engage in craving. So, this is why it's rooted in desire. Your desire is to continue existing so that you can continue to have pleasant experiences. And to continue to do that, you need 5 aggregates so that you can have contact with these pleasant experiences. Until you have grown what's called nibbida, which is disenchantment for all of these experiences, then you're going to continue to have that craving, that desire, and you're going to continue to be reborn. It's letting go of that cuts out the cycle of being reborn. Tanha is the root cause, which is translated as craving, but it's the best way to the direct translation of tanha is, and since I'm going to start using these Pali words, I'll type them out, is the direct translation is thirst. So it's our thirst to continue on experiencing pleasant experiences through our senses. And it's the mind. The mind wants to continue on with these experiences. Yes. Kama tanha is thirst for sensual pleasures. Bhava is thirst for existence. And vibhava is thirst for non-existence. You want to continue to exist. There's some people that want to continue not to exist. Thirst for knowledge would be considered part of this thirst for contact, this thirst for experiences. It's pleasant to learn things and to know things. Yes. Yes, actually, in one of the suttas, I believe it's the Majjhima Nikaya, where the Ananda, who's a monk and who's the chief attendant of the Buddha, says that it is through craving that craving is destroyed. So if you change your desires and your craving to letting go of desire and craving, that is how you do it. I mean, you wouldn't practice, if you're a practitioner and you've been doing it for years, if there was no desire to seek some kind of goal through that practice, you're not going to do it. So that's why it is important to have that desire, to have that goal. Delusion over the nature of things, the root of them all. I would say that the delusion or the ignorance, avidya, is what causes us to believe that we can somehow find some solely pleasurable experience and lessen our suffering while being in the world, being attached to the world's bait. So, greed, hatred, and delusion, or as you say, attachment, aversion, and delusion, are the three roots of craving. That's lobha, dosa, and moha. Lobha is the root, that is the attachment. That is the I like mind. I like it, I want more of it, I don't want to lose it, I want to hold it, grasp it, cling to it, not let anybody take it away. Dosa is the I dislike mind. A mind of aversion. I don't want to have anything to do with it. I want to push it away, kick it away, kill it, hide from it, whatever. And then moha is delusion. We're deluded about a lot of things. As Susie said, the true nature of things. We're deluded in the fact that we believe that we have a permanent soul, that there is some kind of inner core essence that is everlasting and eternal. That's the biggest thing. That's the biggest hurdle. It's actually partly because we believe we have this kind of eternal soul that we continue to attach and to cling and to crave more further existence with these five aggregates, because we don't see things as they truly are. We don't see three things. We don't see that all things are impermanent, which means ever-changing, unstable. You cannot depend on them. You cannot cling to them, grasp to them. They will slip through your fingers. Everything is impermanent. Anicca. Everything is dukkha, or suffering, unsatisfactory. If we try to attach to things that are impermanent, if we try to make the impermanent permanent, we cause ourselves suffering. We don't want to grow old. We don't want to get sick. We don't want to die. We have no say in the matter. And by struggling against that, we cause ourselves dukkha. And the third thing is anatta, which is not self. There is nothing that we can see that is this permanent self. Some people translate it as soullessness. I prefer not self, myself. So these three things are vipassana. Vipassana means to see through, or to see deeply. And when you are in your meditation seeing these three things, you have a mind of vipassana. So we've gone a little bit off the rails here. let's, but we also don't have too much more time to go here on the sutta, I think. Let's see if we can, if you want to continue typing, I'll look and we'll discuss as we go along here. But, Venerable Sir, speaking of anatta, we're going to get into identity view here. How does identity view come to be? Here, bhikkhus, an untaught ordinary person who has no regard for the noble ones and is unskilled and undisciplined in their dhamma, who has no regard for true men and is unskilled and undisciplined in their dhamma, regards material form as self, or self as possessed of material form, or material form as in self, or self as in material form. He regards feeling as self. And again, the same thing, as regards feeling as self, or self possessed of feeling, or feeling possessed of self, or self as in feeling, etc. He regards perception as self. He regards formations as self. He regards consciousness as self, or as self possessed of consciousness, or consciousness as in self, or self as in consciousness. That is how identity view comes to be. So there you go. But Venerable Sir, how does identity view not come to be? Here, bhikkhu, a well-taught noble disciple, who has regard for the noble ones and is skilled in their discipline and in their dhamma, who has regard for true men and is skilled in their discipline and dhamma, does not regard material form as self, nor as self possessed of material form, or material form as in self, or self as in material form. He does not regard feeling as self, does not regard perception as self, does not regard formations as self, consciousness as self, or self possessed of consciousness, or consciousness as in self, or self as in consciousness. That is how identity view does not come to be. When we stop identifying with the 5 aggregates as self, they cease to become the 5 aggregates subject to clinging, because we're not clinging to them anymore. And so then the next section is, what, Venerable Sir, is the gratification, the danger, and what is the escape in the case of material form? What is the gratification, danger, and escape in the case of feeling, perception, formations, and consciousness? So gratification, danger, and escape is an important aspect of the teaching. See, people often think that Buddhists, you're supposed to shun any kind of happiness in this world or anything like that, like you're supposed to be just this miserable, depressed sot. But actually, that's not the case. The Buddha wants us to understand that there is pleasant, feeling, happy experiences in this world. That's the gratification. We obtain gratification from experiences. If we didn't, we wouldn't keep being reborn. There's also a danger in that. And the danger is that everything is subject to impermanence. And how do we escape that? So the Buddha wants us to know in all aspects of our experience, what is the gratification of that? What is the danger in it? And what is the escape in it? So if you become delve deeper into your Buddhist practice in the sutras, you'll see gratification, danger, and escape fairly often. So, and here the Buddha explains it very simply. The pleasure and joy that arise in dependence on material form. That is the gratification in case of material form. Material form is impermanent, suffering, and subject to change. This is the danger in the case of material form. The removal of desire and lust, the abandonment of desire and lust for material form. That is the escape in the case of material form. And then it continues, the pleasure and joy that arises dependent on feeling, independent on perception, independence on formations, independence on consciousness. This is the gratification in the case of these things. That feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness is impermanent, suffering, and subject to change. This is the danger in the case of these things. The removal of desire and lust, the abandonment of desire and lust for consciousness, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. This is the escape in the case of these things. And so the monk asks more, Venerable Sir, how does one know? How does one see? So that in regard to this body, with its consciousness and all external signs, there is no I-making, no mine-making, and no underlying tendency to conceit. I-making, my-making, underlying tendency to conceit. This is mano, tanha, and diti. This is mind-making is the craving to make it mine. Underlying tendency to conceit is creating, bolstering this identity. And no making of an identity. I-making. So how do you know these things without these problems, is what he's asking. And so, the Buddhist continues. Any kind of material form whatsoever, whether past or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, one sees all material form as it is, actually is, with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. Any kind of feeling whatsoever, any kind of perception whatsoever, any kind of formations whatsoever, any kind of consciousness whatsoever. Can you look at your thoughts and say, oh yeah, those aren't my thoughts? It's not easy. But this is part of the practice. And as you delve deeper into the practice, you start to have these little insights. And it becomes a little easier to understand. So, one sees all feeling, perception, mental formation, and consciousness as it actually is, with proper wisdom, thus. This is not mine. This I am not. Another way of I've heard this translated as, this is not mine, this is not me, this is not myself. So this is not mine. If it's not mine, I can't cling to it. This is not me. This is in identifying, conceit, identifying with this. And this is not myself. This is not I don't have this view of self in relation to this thing that I'm looking at. So, then, in the mind of a certain bhikkhu, this thought arose. So it seems, material form is not self, feeling, perception, formations, and consciousness is not self. What self, then, will actions done by the not-self affect? So basically, in a way, this guy is asking one of the most famous questions in Buddhism, which is, if there is no self, then what gets reborn? So he's asking, well, if there's no self, if there's not self, then what is then how is this not self affecting this not self? That's basically, let's see, there's a Bhikkhu Bodhi note. Let's see what, yes, okay, so, and this is exactly pertaining to that question that I just said. In the Bhikkhu Bodhi's comment says, it seems that this bhikkhu had difficulty in understanding how kamma, or karma, can produce results without a self to receive them. So, yeah, because it's very complicated. It's all processes. It's all a web of processes. But we tend to like to make things more simplified. And so, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, then it's a self. These 5 aggregates look like a self. I feel like a self. I perceive a self, so I must have a self. And it must be this eternal thing that continues on after this body, after this form is destroyed. And the Buddha comes around and says, nope, not so. That in itself is karma. What in itself is karma? The misunderstanding? Yes. Well, our volitional formations are karma. If we did not have these 5 aggregates, how could we understand what a self is? You need that perception and consciousness and all these things to create a self. I am doing this. I am eating. I am sleeping. I am running across the plains. Are you? Are you really? The Buddha might say otherwise. Okay. So, then basically the Buddha is saying here, what did I mess this up here? Then the Blessed One, knowing in his mind the thought in the mind of the bhikkhu, addressed the bhikkhus thus. It is possible that some misguided man here, obtuse and ignorant, with his mind dominated by craving, might think that he can outstrip the teacher's dispensation thus. So it seems material form is not self. Consciousness, except ... consciousness. What self then will actions done by the not self effect? So basically the Buddha is saying that this guy is trying to make some end run or be a smart aleck or something like that. And the Buddha's not having it. So he says, now he doesn't respond to that. He trains, he goes to the other bhikkhus. And he says, now bhikkhus, you have been trained by me through interrogation on various occasions in regard to various things. And so he asked them, bhikkhus, what do you think? Is material form permanent or impermanent? What do you think the answer is? Do you know of any material form that is permanent? I can tell you right now that science doesn't. No, we don't know anything that is permanent, not even the universe. So the answer is impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? So this goes back to when I was talking about dukkha. When you have this impermanent thing that is unstable, clinging to that, trying to identify with that, can you, is that happiness? Is that sukha or dukkha? And of course the answer is suffering, Venerable Sir. And so then it continues, is what is impermanent suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus? This is mine. This I am. This is myself. And so what's the answer? No, Venerable Sir. And so he continues with the rest. Is feeling, perception, formations, consciousness permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent, suffering, and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is myself. No, Venerable Sir. Therefore, bhikkhus, any kind of material form whatsoever, whether past, future, or present, all material form should be seen as it actually is, with the proper wisdom thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. Any kind of feeling whatsoever, perception whatsoever, formations whatsoever, consciousness whatsoever, all should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. Seeing thus, a well-taught noble disciple becomes disenchanted. That's nibbida. Excuse me, that's the nibbida. So you're understanding that if I attach to these things, I'm going to causing my own suffering. And in doing that, it's like, the child that puts their hand on the stove for the first time and gets burned, right? Does the child continue to keep putting their hand on the stove? Oh, I got burned. Oh, I got burned. That's pretty much what we're doing every time we're in a new life. Oh, this new life is be great. I can have all kinds of fun, and then you die, and then you're born again. Oh, this new life, it will be great. I'll have all kinds of fun and good experiences, and so we're just like we're the child, the dense child that keeps putting their finger on the stove and keeps burning, because we don't understand this important understanding of impermanence, and we're not disenchanted yet. When we become disenchanted with form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, then being disenchanted, he becomes dispassionate. That's viraga. So when we're disenchanted, I used to like this show. I'll use a TV show as an example. I used to like this show, but not so much anymore. And then what happens with that? You don't have the passion to want to watch it anymore. The passion has gone. Or, I used to like this person that I called my spouse or my partner. Not so much anymore. The passion's gone. Right? So, with disenchantment comes dispassion. And then, through dispassion, the mind is liberated, awakened. And then he understands. Oh no, and then with liberation there comes the knowledge it is liberated. What is liberated? Not this male or this female or this person, Joe Schmo from down the block. It is liberated. The mind is liberated. And then they understand. This is one of my favorite sayings from the suttas. Actually, I just learned the Pali because I'm going to use it in a Dhamma talk at the next retreat we're doing. Birth is destroyed. Ki na jati. The holy life has been lived. Vasatang brahmacharyam. What had to be done has been done. Katang karaniyam. There is no more coming to any state of being. Na parang ittatayati pajanati. This is called the victory cry of the Arahants. This is like when a person becomes awakened, this is what they understand, this is what they say. That it has been cut out. What had to be done has been done. Birth is destroyed. There is no more coming to another state. It's done. And that is what the Blessed One said. The bhikkhus were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's word. Now, while this discourse was being spoken, through not clinging, the minds of 60 bhikkhus were liberated from the taints. So basically, meaning 60 people became enlightened, awakened when they heard this Dhamma talk. And that's it. That is the end of this sutta. And we are at the end of our time. If you would like to go, you can. If you have questions, we can still hang out for a little bit. I'm up for being around if people have questions. It is complicated things. I can't even say I have full mastery or full understanding of these myself. I'm still learning, and you understand this through your practice. You can read these things, but you understand it through your wisdom, through your experience. You can say, you can use the mantra, oh, this is impermanent, all the time. But until you actually understand that it's impermanent, you're going to attach to it, and you're going to cause yourself to suffer because of that. There's a wonderful simile that used by this monk Ajahn Chah, where he talks about a cup, and he lifts up a cup during the talk, and he says, "Do you see the crack in this cup?" And he points it up, and everybody's looking for the crack, and nobody can see the crack. He says, "You don't see the crack in this cup?" And of course, obviously it wasn't an obvious crack. It was a minute crack. Basically what it was he was saying that this cup at one point will break. It's already broken. It's inevitable that it will break. And so why get attached to it? It's inevitable that we will die. We will grow old, get sick, and die. So why lament over that? We don't have to. That's part of the choice that comes when we practice. If we get sick, if we get old, it's just part of nature. Or we can choose to really not like it and fight against it and be sad and suffer because of it. It's our choice. And you can do that. You can make that choice. it comes with the practice, and you can understand that. Okay, friends, do we have any questions? I don't think so. Just see a bunch of thank yous and sadhus. So, actually, let's end with a dedication or a sharing of merits. The sharing of merits is using thoughts of goodwill in gratitude for being able to listen to the Dhamma and to come together and do a good deed, which is what listening to the Dhamma is. So let me find this here. I don't have this memorized just quite yet, so I have to read it. If I can find it, I guess I can find it. Oh well. Oh, I have it. Here we go. May the suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we've thus acquired, for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas, nagas, and yakas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, friends. That's it for today.